Hello everybody, and welcome to my review of The Division 2. For those of you who have been on the channel for a while, you know that I put up many long videos of my thoughts on specific games, but never do I ever call those videos reviews. The reason why is simply because while I'm knowledgeable in those games and I'm confident in my opinions on those games and making a recommendation one way or another, I never dive deep enough into those games by the time I put those videos up to actually qualify those as reviews. This, however, is a different matter. I have put, at this point, the game released on Friday. It is now Wednesday of the following week, and I've put 50 hours into the game already, and I plan on putting a lot more. I feel very qualified in my opinions on this game based on the games that I play. And I just feel confident in talking about this game at length because I understand it very well. Therefore, this is my first review video on the channel. Now, with that said, this is going to be a very dense video. The Division 2 is a massive game and there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but I'm going to try to keep it all spoiler free. I'm not going to go over any specifics in the story in case you're interested in that part of the game, but we are going to talk about the individual systems and what you end up unlocking as you get towards end game and what you'll end up doing once you reach max level and hit that end game. So where I'm going to begin my review is with my overview, my general thoughts about the game, so you know where I stand. First and foremost, I think this game has countless layers to it, and you're going to hear me refer to that throughout this video. What I mean by that is every single time that you're starting to feel comfortable with how the game is, and you're like, okay, this is the game. This is what I'm going to expect for the next, 20 levels or so. It adds a new system. And it constantly is adding new things for you to do right when you're starting to get bored of the stuff that's currently available. And it's crazy how they manage to tune it in just a way that right when you're getting bored or you're getting comfortable, they throw in something new for you to do. And it's amazing. It's a great feeling and I love it. Plus, it continues past level 30 into the end game. It constantly is adding new stuff, and that is only a good thing. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail. The second thing is this game does loot correctly. Loot is plentiful and it matters, and that's a hard balance to have. You're never walking into an area where there's a ton of chests for you to loot and feeling dread, being like, oh, I'm not going to get anything good out of this, what's the point? No, every time you find an area where you can loot, you're so excited because you often open up a chest and get a new item that is exciting and cool and is a big upgrade for you. For example, you may have opened up a new chest and you got this awesome rare SMG. Well, it may be an SMG that you've used previously in the game, but it has different perks on it, and it is really good compared to the stuff you have, and you're excited to get that thing, and you're like, ooh, yes, I can't believe it, I got this thing that I wanted out of this random chest, and that happens constantly throughout the game. Again, loot is plentiful, it matters, and this game does loot correctly. Next, I think that the end game in The Division 2 is amazing, and there's plenty of stuff for you to do once you hit max level and start kind of working on grinding out some gear and getting your character more and more powerful. Many games in this genre launch with not a whole lot of stuff to do once you hit max level, but The Division 2 is not shy about giving you plenty of stuff, and you're going to be busy for quite some time, and there's more stuff on its way. On top of that, the gameplay is fun and engaging. There is a serious tactical chess game going on at any given time within encounters, especially once you get to the end game and you're fighting tougher and tougher enemies. Again, we'll dive deeper into that later in the video. But overall, I think the story itself is very forgettable compared to the first game. I loved the story in the first game and going through what happened with the dollar flu and who done it, and you're kind of going through the detective work there and trying to stop it. I think that the setting for the first game is also better, but that doesn't mean that DC is bad. It just means that it's not as good as the first game, and I think that the story is rather poor compared to that first Division. Also, strange bugs arise often, and you're going to find yourself fighting the controls at times, but those things aside, the game is fantastic. Do I recommend it? 100%. I think this game is more than worth the asking price for it based on not only the time and the quality of time you're going to get out of this game, but just because the game itself has so much for you to do and is going to be adding more stuff on top of that. If you're into games like this, right now, this is the game to have. So now let's dive in very deep and talk about the nitty-gritty details in the game, starting with the leveling experience. So leveling up to max level, which is level 30, and getting the main story done is going to take you approximately 30 hours. And if that sounds like a long time to you, it's because it is. But none of that time is really wasted. There's a lot of stuff for you to do from 1 to 30. It feels new and exciting constantly throughout that experience, and you're never going to really feel like you're slogging through the leveling process. You know, when you often mention leveling to people who play a lot of RPGs, you're like, ugh, like especially MMOs, they're like, ugh, the leveling is always the worst part, right? Just get me to end game or whatever. But in this case, leveling is a delight, and those 30 hours are very well spent. So the leveling experience starts with you going and getting your base of operations, which happens to be the White House. And that's pretty cool. It's a short little mission, and right afterwards you get a cutscene and some story set up for the next bit, which it wants you to move out into the world. So like in an open world game, it's like, hey, here's this point on the map that you need to go to next. This is your main mission. And you're like, cool, let's go do that. But you have to walk all the way there. And the cool thing is, this world is very dense and populated. There's a lot of stuff for you to see along the way. So on your way to this first point, which happens to be the theater settlement, you can find a ton of stuff to get distracted with. You know, there's phones to pick up, which are little like voice recording, like audio bits that give you some detail on the story or just, you know, how the world is in DC, because you know, you're coming from the first game, which had you in New York, and the dollar flu was contained to New York. So the game wants to set up and tell you the story of how that got out of hand and how now DC has fallen and you're trying to retake it, right? So finding little phones or what are called echoes, which are like visual replays of events that happen to the citizens within the city. You find these things and they're collectibles along the way, and you're getting little bits of story. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you're going to get some cool stuff out of that. But just going from point A to point B on the map is an exciting venture because it, right off the bat, gives you plenty of stuff to find. On top of that, you're going to be finding little pockets of enemies that have their own little random events going on. And by the time you get to the theater district, you're going to be like, okay, that was kind of a cool experience going from point A to point B. I learned something about the world. Maybe I just ran to point B as quickly as I could and took the direct route rather than exploring. You're still going to find cool stuff on that direct route, and I think that's really cool. This experience continues throughout the entire game. Anytime you're traveling from point A to point B, there's going to be cool things to find along the way. You know, fast traveling is a possibility. You have the option of fast traveling to places that you've unlocked. But it is always fun to go back and just run from point A to point B because you're going to find new stuff. You're going to find new events. And if you're one of those people that really like collectibles like myself, you're going to find plenty of the echoes and the phones to unlock. Also, they've added a new type of collectible into this game, which are like artworks. So you can find like works of art, like the self-portrait of Van Gogh, for instance, and be able to find that thing and collect it. Because of course, DC has fallen. This stuff that is cherished and, you know, put into museums is no longer there. It's been taken out by looters and whatnot. So when you find this stuff, like Abraham Lincoln's hat, his top hat, you find on a statue randomly in a park that someone has just put it there. You can grab that and you take that, and it's a cool little collectible thing. So if you're interested in finding that stuff, if you're a person who, as one of my friends put it, likes turning a red map green, there's going to be plenty of stuff for you to do when just traveling from point A to point B, and that is really good. So after you get to the first settlement, which is the theater, you unlock this new system of settlements, which are new to the game in general. You know, this wasn't in the First Division game. In the First Division, you just had your safe houses to unlock, and there's plenty of safe houses to unlock in the Division 2, but there's also a couple settlements that you also unlock, which are useful for unlocking main features and systems within the game. So you get there, you get your first mission, and it's pretty standard Division stuff. You need to go up and jump into this mission to return somebody's daughter to them. In that mission, it feels very standard. It's not complicated at all. You're cover shooting, you're fighting people. Eventually you get to the end of the mission, you fight a boss, you kill him, you collect loot, you return, you finish the mission, you get a cool cutscene. You're like, okay, cool, that was nice. But then the game just kind of like opens up and it changes the way that you remember the Division being in really good ways. If you think back to the first game and you think to New York, I have fond memories of running around New York and being like, this place is awesome. I love the way that they've made this environment. I love running around in it. I love exploring it. But after a while, it got very samey. You know, there was always the same apartment buildings, right? You always go into them and you're like, oh, I know where everything is at. I know how to get up these stairs because it's the same in every apartment building. It's a very different experience for DC. Things are laid out in different ways all over the place. So exploring the environment feels unique, and it never really feels like you're going into the same place twice. And that's a really important thing, especially when it comes to the missions, right? You finish your first mission, you get the cool stuff, the game opens up, sends you to your second mission, which you can totally go do if you want, but there's a ton of other stuff on your map now. You know, now you can go do side missions, which give you upgrades to the theater settlement and make that theater settlement have visual changes to it. You know, you're adding like new power sources for them. You're adding like a hydroponic system for them to be able to grow their own food, and the theater settlement is changing. And if your friend enters your world, they're going to see your theater settlement, which is cool. So they get to see what kind of upgrades you've had. And likewise, if you enter their game, you're going to see what theirs is like. So you go do these side missions, you go start collecting stuff, and you're starting to realize as you look at the map at this point that, okay, doing main missions is going to unlock skill points, and doing side missions and, you know, collecting the safe house in each area will show you on the map where things called the shade tech are. And these are two very important collectibles as you level up. So the skill points will unlock a skill for you. So say you want to unlock the healing drone or the shield or the turret. You know, you have to spend a skill point to unlock that skill. Then the second thing you get, the second collectible, are the shade tech. Now, shade tech can be used to unlock your passive stuff. So not necessarily your actual skills that you're using, but everything passively in the background. And I would suggest maxing all of that out with all the shade tech you get immediately. You know, there's one, for instance, that increases the XP you get on headshots or multi-kills or by staying alive longer. And getting that XP bonus early in the game is really powerful. But there's also things like increasing the amount of repair kits that you can have to keep yourself alive, or being able to, you know, have a better inventory for some of the stuff like crafting materials and whatnot in your inventory. And just getting that stuff off the bat, I would suggest doing if you're leveling up. You know, get all of that the passive skills unlocked as quickly as possible. Go throughout your map and unlock the shade tech. Go to the safe house, get it visible on your map, which that'll be the thing. You know, there's a thing in the safe house that you click on that will make it so in that zone, all the shade tech is visible. You go and collect all that stuff. I think that is a really important step in your leveling process. And by doing that, you're going to be coming across different events. Some of these events, to name a few, that you're going to find pretty much right at the beginning of the game are control points and propaganda towers. So like the control point, for instance, is an area where you walk up on it and an enemy has control of this area. So you go in there and you can use your signal flare to signal allies to come, you know, NPC allies to come and help you take it back, or you can do it by yourself, but you signal the flare, your allies come, or they try to, and you begin the process of taking these enemies out. You clear them out, and it's pretty standard each time you do this, right? You clear out one wave of enemies that currently exist in there. A second wave of enemies will spawn and a boss will come with it. You kill that boss, and then now you have taken the control point, except it flips, where all of a sudden the enemies are going to try to take it back. So as soon as you kill that boss, your allies move in, you now take control of the defensive point on it, so you have better defense essentially against the new enemies coming out. It'll spawn one wave of enemies, you kill those, it'll spawn a second wave of enemies, a boss comes, you kill that, and now you have the control point. That seems like a very repetitive thing, and it is, but it never feels the same. You're always attacking these control points in different ways. Some control points have miniguns, which make it harder to attack, but once you get it, you can use those miniguns to defend, and the act of getting each control point feels different. So while the mechanic works the same and you understand how to take a control point after, doing your first or second one, never are you feeling like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, because it feels different each time. And I think that is a really important thing to have in a game that has some repetitive elements to it, because the feeling of finding a new control point and being like, ooh, how am I going to take this one out, always feels good. On top of that, when you clear a control point, you get access to a loot room, and you get to go in there and loot a ton of stuff, and it's always a huge upgrade on the stuff that you're using. I've seen suggestions to people to not loot the loot rooms until you hit max level, but that is wrong. That is 100% wrong. Do not do that. Go and loot them, get your upgrades, because once you hit max level and you finish the story, something will happen, which I'll talk about later in the video, which will switch all those back over. So you'll get access to those loot rooms once again. So yeah, just clear it, get your loot to begin with. Don't save that kind of stuff. In a similar vein, you're going to get like these little propaganda towers that you can go and take. You clear the few enemies that are there and you turn it on. You just have to defend it and kill the enemies that are coming, and, reactivate the tower once or twice in that process to get their propaganda off and to start broadcasting your own thing. And at the end, you typically get like a cache to go loot, or maybe you get a piece of loot off of one of the enemies that come. So it's worth doing while you're going through that process and clearing out the map. And as I said earlier, which is a really good example of, what these games are, you're turning the red map green. You're turning these points green instead of red, and it's satisfying to do. There's other events like this, like public executions or hostage situations, and you're going through and you're finishing these. But while they mechanically work the same in their own rights, they never really feel too samey, and you always do feel rewarded by doing them, because again, as I said at the beginning, loot is plentiful and it matters. So doing this stuff gets you loot, and that loot matters because it's almost always a good upgrade what you currently have. And this rotation that you get into of going into a new zone, doing the side missions to get shade tech, or in some cases, stuff for your guns, which we'll talk about modifications and skill mods later. Then you go do this, you get this stuff by doing side missions, you do the main missions to get your skill points, and you get your shade tech in the process of all this. You're collecting it by getting to the safe house, unlocking your shade tech on the map. You go collect all your shade tech, you get your upgrades. It's a repetitive process in its own right, but never does it feel repetitive. It just feels like you're starting to get a hold of how the game works, and you're starting to understand how to play the game in cool ways. And every time that you're going through these processes, you're starting to learn this stuff. You're unlocking new layers, and you're starting to realize that yes, this stuff can be repetitive, but the act of doing each individual one is unique. And on top of that, right when you're starting to feel like it's getting repetitive, it adds a new system on top of that for you to unlock. One of these systems that you unlock are projects, and they are tied to the two settlements in the game. So you have the theater settlement and the campus settlement. So for the theater settlement, you get that pretty early, and you unlock projects pretty much right off the bat once you get the theater settlement, which are these things that you can finish, and you can do it on your map. Here's a pro tip. You can open your map, and on the PC, you can use Q and E to switch between the tabs on your map. On console, I believe it's the triggers, and you can switch to the project tab, and you can complete these projects by doing things like killing certain enemies. It depends on the project what it wants, but you could kill certain enemies enough times, or do enough events in an area that it requests of you, or you can turn in items as well. So like, items that you no longer need, you can turn those in to help complete these projects. By doing this, you will unlock new things for you to craft, which crafting is a system you unlock through these projects, or through the theater settlement rather. And as you get more and more projects, you're getting more and more schematics for you to make stuff for yourself. So finishing the projects as you go throughout the game is really important, and it leaves you in an interesting dilemma, because you're getting plenty of loot. You can break down this loot, and you should be breaking down this loot for crafting materials. I would suggest it, because you're going to need it. But eventually you get to a point where you're having to choose between breaking down loot or putting it into these projects, because the projects will request, like, it wants 3 gloves or 3 holsters or 3 backpacks. And when you get to max level, there's projects that require a lot of different items. So you kind of have to choose, am I going to break this stuff down, or am I going to put it into the projects? Well, thankfully, it's not that big of a deal to decide, hey, I'm going to put this stuff into projects, because it's going to give you so much loot anyways. And eventually you're going to be capped on the crafting materials. Now, here's the real kicker. Once you get capped on crafting materials and you're no longer breaking down your items, I would suggest getting all these items that you're not using, and instead of breaking them down, throw them in your stash. Get your stash tabs upgraded so you have a lot more space in your stash, because you're going to be using these items to donate to the projects anyways. And it puts you in a really nice gameplay loop of like, oh, I'm getting this gear that I'm upgrading, and the crap that I had before that I could break down or sell, and, you know, I could put it in my stash. And then again, once you have enough of this saved up, you could take those items that you would normally be breaking down or stashing, and you could just start selling this stuff for credits, because you will need that at max level as well. So there's a lot of different layers to how you go about, you know, using the gear that you're not going to be using anymore. Another cool thing is that while leveling up, some of your main missions really like to change the pace of things. So once you get past your first 1 or 2 missions, you're going to realize that you're getting into these museum missions, and they are extremely cool, well crafted, and probably some of the coolest content in the game. So, for example, one of the museum missions is the American History Museum. And you go in there and you're just, you know, you're clearing out these hyenas or whoever ends up being there. And it seems like just another normal mission. But as you go throughout it, you're realizing that, oh, I am getting very interesting set pieces here. The areas that I am exploring in these missions are really cool. So for the American History Museum, you go through a Vietnam exhibit, and that has, you know, like all of the Vietnam noise. You've got the jungle noise playing in the background because it is a museum exhibit. You get like the Huey helicopters and stuff, the noises of all that, and you're fighting enemies within these areas that are these exhibits, and it is just so freaking cool because it is a unique and really quite ingenious way of changing the environments that you're playing in, so it doesn't always feel like, oh, I'm in New York, or, oh, I guess I'm in DC. No, it's like I am getting teleported to these other worlds through these really interesting museum missions, and I freaking love it. It comes just at the point where you're starting to get used to the idea of DC, and you're like, okay, I understand what Washington, DC looks like, apparently. And then you get thrown into these museum missions, and you're just like, this is incredible what they've done as far as diversity in the environments. And because the loot in this game matters, you're going to be finding hidden loot rooms in these missions as well. And you're gonna want to open them up, because you're always like, hey, that chest in there, I know that specific chest always drops a weapon, and I really need an upgrade right now on my weapons. And you know what? I need to find a way in there. And a lot of these main missions have little puzzles for you to figure out on how to get into these loot rooms. Sometimes it's something pretty obvious, like, you know, you just shoot the lock, like these like yellow locks that are on these doors. You shoot that and you're able to get in. You're like, cool, that was easy. Other times it's like you have to go and explore the environment in order to find a way into the room by maybe like shutting off the power in an area in order to shut off the power for the electric lock on that door. And this is a huge testament to the environment design in this game, which is exceptional. You'll often, in the open world, find little loot rooms as well that you can get into, either by shooting, you know, these yellow locks, or by finding specific ways in, because it'll be, you know, blocked off, and you're like, how the heck do I get into there? And by taking a minute to try to look around the environment, you find the way in. And it seems like a really simple idea. You know, it's just a simple loot room with a little puzzle of how to get into it. But it is such a big difference in the fact that the only reason these loot rooms matter is because the loot matters, and you want more loot. To me, this is a problem that Anthem suffers from in a big way. The loot in Anthem never feels that great. It's not worth it, because every time you get a piece of loot in Anthem, it's like a little tiny percentile upgrade. And it doesn't matter what you get, it's just a little tiny percentile upgrade. And you're like, okay, cool. The next boss I'm going to kill, or the next mission I'm going to kill, I'm going to get a little tiny percentage upgrade. Whereas in The Division, you get big upgrades sometimes, and loot is really exciting to drop because you're like, oh, geez, I just got the most amazing weapon for my level right now. This is going to be crazy, and it's going to make a big difference in how you play the game. It's not going to keep things balanced sometimes. Sometimes you will have a weapon that absolutely demolishes enemies, and for a good 3 or 4 levels, you're going to be enjoying the fruits of that. But in Anthem, you're not getting that. You are literally getting tiny little upgrades here and there that you can't even equip immediately. You have to wait to go back to Fort Tarsis, and that is a big problem of that game and how the loot feels. It's completely different in The Division. You're constantly getting big upgrades that you can immediately equip and immediately see the results of, and that feels so good. Another game that has recently done this that has felt really good with loot is when Diablo changed to Loot 2.0 with Reaper of Souls. When Diablo 3 first came out, the loot felt awful because it was balanced around the fact that you could buy whatever piece you wanted off of the auction house, and you could do so with real money. So the loot was, as much as they wanted to prevent that, balanced as far as drops are concerned on the fact that they wanted you to use the auction house to get your loot. And that wasn't a good feeling. When Reaper of Souls came out, they ditched the auction house and they changed how loot worked, and they made each individual piece matter so much more. And the result is that Diablo 3, as it currently stands, feels really good for loot. It feels good to pick up a piece of loot. It feels good to level up during a season. You're like, ooh, there's a new thing. Ooh, I got a new legendary as I'm leveling up. Ooh, it's a big upgrade. Ooh, I'm going to need that for max level. And that's the way that the Division 2 feels. And that is a good spot to be in, where every single time you get loot, you're excited that it could be something big, and it could be this big upgrade, which means that you are actively seeking out these loot rooms. You're actively seeking out these main missions and these side missions and these little hidden areas in the world because you want more loot. The game is driven by that system, and it does so in an incredible way. And you know what? The game encourages you to explore the world because it puts things in there that are good to find. A good example of this is the shade tech, right? You need shade tech to get your passive skills upgraded. And going and finding that and seeking that stuff out often leads you across cool discoveries. You're like, oh, I found a control point, or oh, I found a public execution that I could stop, or ooh, I found a loot room. And just going to get the shade tech forces you to explore the world, which allows you to experience these cool moments of either emergent gameplay of finding these events that you want to go and clear out because you know you're going to get loot, or you're going to find a loot room that you're going to go try to get into because you get cool loot. You know, the game is driven on the loot. With the shade tech unlocking, it gives you another reason to go and seek out stuff within the world and start getting comfortable and acquainted with Washington, D.C. And it's really cool because there's a lot of awesome stuff to see without, you know, necessarily feeling like you just have to go do it because you have to go do it. It's like you want to go do it. You want to go explore these areas. And also, the other thing with the shade tech is they did something pretty smart in the fact that you get your skill points from main missions to unlock your skills, but you only unlock that main skill if you want to unlock the other variants of it. So, you know, for example, you have the turret, which has a flamethrower turret or a sniper turret, or just you throw it down and it shoots stuff turret. You have to use your shade tech in order to upgrade and unlock those other pieces of your skills. So again, it gives you another reason to have to go out there and find this shade tech to begin with, which is all driven on the fact that you're doing it because you want to find more loot and you're getting a lot of loot out of it. So while we're on the subject of loot, let's really dive into that. So equipment wise, you've got normal equipment that is just stuff with stat upgrades and, you know, general use stuff. But you also have sets, which you will get throughout the game, which are all based on different manufacturers. You know, think Borderlands, right? This is a good way to think about it, is sometimes you will come across a set, and it is because it is manufactured by a certain manufacturer. And by collecting and wearing more pieces of that manufacturer, you will gain set bonuses. So like 10% skill reduction, cooldown reduction, or maybe, you know, 20% additional sniper rifle damage and stuff like that. So finding these sets and matching them up are really important if you really want to min-max your gameplay. This doesn't matter too much while leveling up. You'll often just switch to whatever the better item is, unless you're losing a really good perk off of one of these items. But typically speaking, you'll find a really high level item. You know, maybe it'll be a level 25 item and you currently have a level 20 item on, then you're going to want to upgrade to that one kind of regardless of the stat changes, or the set changes as well. So that doesn't matter too much leveling up, but you do get the benefit of that, obviously, if you really want to dive deep into that system. But once you hit max level, you are trying to get sets that match and really complement your gameplay style. So you get these loot sets that you're trying to match up. Each of these pieces of loot, especially at max level, have multiple perks on them, which require you to have specific stats. You know, you've got like your health stat, your defensive stat, you got your skill stat, which is your skill power, and you have your gun stat, which makes you shoot better. So you're kind of balancing these three, and certain perks require you to have different numbers of those or different combinations of those. So, you know, a perk may be like every time you get a headshot, you increase, or a body shot with a sniper rifle, you increase your headshot damage by 10%. And this stacks up and lasts, you know, a certain amount of time. So if you're able to find, you know, like a good set that increases your sniper rifle damage and you get some cool sniper rifle perks on it and you're getting the stats to increase your weapon damage, you're going to be a very effective sniper in the game. And as you go and you do your project turn-ins and you're getting those done and you're doing your side missions, you're going to be unlocking modifications for your gear. These work differently than in the first division game. In the first division, you would have like 20 different magazines and like 5 or 6 different scopes that you would always switch between. And anytime you wanted to dismantle a weapon or get rid of a weapon, you had to go in and take those stuff off so you kept them. Well, in the Division 2, as far as weapons are concerned, your modifications aren't unique. They are a thing that you then have. So imagine you get the recipe to craft a really good magazine. You go and do that. That magazine is now used for all of your weapons if you want to use it. It's just available as like an infinite pool of stuff that you can use. You don't have to worry about taking these modifications off if you're going to destroy the weapon or sell it, because you constantly have an infinite supply of that magazine that you created for weapons, which is cool. The other thing is that modifications in the Division 2 have positive bonuses and a negative bonus. Sometimes this feels punishing just for the sake of adding checks and balances, but overall, the system really works. So how it works is, you know, you may find a magazine that increases the rounds on the weapon by 20 or 30, but decreases the reload time, right? So, you know, you get a lot of stuff like that. But it works because you're going to find weapons, like an LMG, for example, that has really low stability. And if you shot it without any modifications on it, it's going to be impossible to shoot. It's just going to go everywhere. And the thing is, if you use modifications, you can increase the stability while also decreasing some other things, like decreasing the effective range or the crit chance. And even though those things suck to lose, you're not really losing out on too much because you're gaining a freaking weapon that you can actually fire, right? You're gaining the stability that you need on that weapon. Sometimes you're gaining stability at the cost of accuracy, and that's a fair trade. But overall, you're trying to modify the weapons in the ways that fit your playstyle. You know, if you're someone who's using assault rifles and you're confident controlling recoil, you know, maybe you're playing on PC, for example. PC players have a lot better time controlling recoil than console players do, just because of the nature of a controller versus a mouse and keyboard. So you may end up setting up your assault rifle because you're confident in controlling the recoil in a way that you're losing a lot of stability on those weapons. However, you may not be, and you may want to increase, you know, other stats on that weapon. And the fact that you have the freedom to do that feels really, really nice. There's also skill mods in the game, which you modify your skills that you have. You know, you can modify your turrets and whatnot and change how those affect and how those work and gain cooldown reduction. And there's a lot of cool stuff within that system. There's also modifications for items, which kind of is the same thing, except unlike weapons, you do have to hold on to those modifications for items. So, you know, your backpack, if you have a mod in there and you go to delete it, you're going to want to go in there and strip the modifications from it before you delete it. It seems like a strange quality of life thing to have on the weapons, but not on the gear, but it is what it is. And for the most part, you'll get used to the system, but I don't think it's that great. The fact that it's not on items and weapons, it is. So it's weird, but it is what it is. Just like in the first game, you can recalibrate your gear, except it works differently in the Division 2. So for the Division 2, you can take a perk that is on your gear, like on an old piece of gear that you're going to be throwing away. You could take that perk and destroy that piece of gear to take that perk and put it on a new piece of gear. And that is really nice because it allows you to perk hunt and find items that you would normally just toss away, and instead keep it and use that to, put that perk on a new item. So you're not necessarily having like all this garbage that you're constantly just deconstructing or selling because you don't need it. You're keeping an eye on everything that you're getting, which again makes loot matter. On top of that, you have all the crafting systems. So if you need to craft a new item because some of your items are out of date, you can do that. Once you get to max level, you'll be crafting items to try to increase your item level, your gear score, higher and higher, which makes it so the stuff that you're getting in the world is dropping at a higher level. So it's this nice little back and forth system of creating new gear that you need in order to get better gear for your other stuff. And that's kind of cool. In general, though, all of this works together to make a fantastic loot system. All of your loot matters, and you're going to feel really good when you're constantly getting upgrades that are going to feel like they're making a difference in your gameplay, and you're also being able to make choices on your loot in the ways that you get them and change how they all affect each other. This loot game that they've developed in the Division 2 works so extremely well, and it is a breath of fresh air from playing recent games in this kind of genre, the subgenre that has developed over the past, 5 or 6 years. The final piece of this loot system to discuss is the extra loot you get. So you get stuff like supplies, you get food, you get water, you get like miscellaneous junk that you're using, and these supplies are used for control points. So you finish taking a control point, you can then return to that control point and give the control point leader supplies like food and water. And these supplies allow you, if you get the passive buff from using your shade tech, to get a buff to your loot visibility range, so you can like see stuff through walls and you're like, ooh, there's a huge loot room in there, how do I get in there? But you can also upgrade it to allow you to visually see enemies from a better distance and actually like mark them out, and that's always cool too. And it makes you feel like you're actually contributing to these control points in cool ways because you're giving them supplies. And on your map, you'll notice, like especially when you get into the later game, that different control points have supply routes that are going back and forth. Yours have friendly supply routes that are going around, and you could go and protect them if you really wanted to. If you saw one under attack or whatever, you could go and make sure that that supply route is actually going to be functional. But the thing is, if the enemies have control points, you can go and hijack their supplies. So if they're running a supply convoy from one control point to another, you could go attack that, get the supplies, and go take those supplies to your control points. And that is really quite a cool system. Let's change gears here and talk about the enemies in the game. So you have a few different factions that you'll fight as you level up. You have the hyenas, which are like basic gang members, and they of course have their own things. Like they take like these stimulant drugs that some of them makes them so they have extra health, and they're going to run at you and try to beat you down. And that is kind of a difficult thing to deal with when you have a couple of those guys coming at you. But of course, all of the enemies in the game have weak points that you can shoot. The enemies have been changed from the first game in the fact that they are no longer bullet sponges. There are times where you're going to be hitting an enemy quite a lot with bullets, but you're not just doing it to throw bullets at them. You're actually looking for weak points on them to do more damage or to avoid their armor. And I think that is a really cool system. It makes a big difference in the feel of the shooting in the game. And overall, it makes a big difference in the variety of enemies you're getting, because different enemies will obviously have different weak points on them, and learning all those stuff is kind of a cool system as you play through the game. So you have the hyenas as one faction. You have the True Sons, which is like the military faction, and man, do they love to flank you, and it's really annoying sometimes. You have the outcasts, which are kind of another gang, but definitely use some interesting tactics. You have like suicide bombers that will run at you, and they are terrifying, and you have to like shoot the bomb on their chest to make them blow up before they get to you. There's just like different little nuances with the three different factions that you are having to learn. And every time you encounter a new faction, you're remembering like, oh, this is the strategy to kill these guys. And, you know, if you're fighting the True Sons, watch out, you're going to get flanked a lot and it's going to suck. But it is a cool idea behind these factions. Just like in the first game, you know, you had like the Cleaners, for instance, that they liked using flamethrowers and stuff, and you always had to watch out for that. But the cool thing with these factions and how they've designed the enemies and the encounters in the game is there is a massive tactical chess game going on. You're having to deal with the fact that there are different pieces on the board at any given encounter, and you have to react differently to those. So for example, most of the factions have some kind of enemy that's going to try to run up to you and attack you either in melee range or try to flank you or try to get up close. They are there tactically to keep you from getting to the back line. So in some cases, the back line are snipers, and they're going to be trying to snipe you as you move from cover to cover to take out these dudes that are rushing you. Or in other cases, they are more engineer type characters. You know, they're spawning drones. Some of them are drones that are like little RC cars. They're going to come at you and try to explode. Others are like flying drones that will do the same thing, try to come at you and explode. There are other support characters that will have a drone and go and try to res the characters that you've killed and bring them back up, or will go do that physically. And the way to stop them is to either kill the drone or to shoot like the backpack as the guy's resing to like stop him. But there's all of these pieces on the board, and they each have their unique things that they do, and the combination of these pieces make a very tactical game. You know, you're having to deal with the fact that you've got these dudes running at you and you need to kill them. But there's this sniper in the back that's really being a big pain in the butt, and you got to kill him too. And oh, there's this guy over here resurrecting, and crap, you got to deal with him before he brings these guys up that you've already killed. And it is just a really cool tactical chess game that is going on at any given encounter, and each encounter is different with each of the different factions. And that is really cool. They just took it to a whole new level from the first game. And you're doing all of this through what I consider a very mediocre story. It's not really memorable. I only remember a couple things here and there from what is actually going on in the story compared to the first game, where I was like totally invested. Like the moment I finished the main mission in the first game, I went out and I found all of the collectible phones and echoes because I wanted to know more about that world. I don't have that desire here. I'm like, okay, well, the game is really fun to play. I'm enjoying the hell out of the game, but what's going on in the story again? I don't remember. Why are these factions here? No, I don't know. And that's a bad design. That's bad writing, but it ultimately hasn't mattered to me because I've been enjoying the gameplay more. And the gameplay is what is really hooked me. And I could relate the game to Diablo 3 again. You know, the Diablo 3 story was bad, but when you got to the end of the game and you started that loot grind, especially in Reaper of Souls, you're like, ooh, this is why I'm playing the game. I'm playing the game for the loot. And I kind of feel like I've taken that same route here in the Division 2. Don't really care too much about the story, haven't gotten invested in it, but man, oh man, do I love my loot. There will be a point though that you take DC back. You push the factions back to their strongholds. And by completing these strongholds, which is kind of what you need to do to finish the story in the game, you eventually push all of the factions back, and you're like, cool, we've taken DC, and you finish the game. And if you're max level, it's going to turn your world into tier 1. So it'll upgrade your world. Enemies will be at your level and will be stronger. And you will start getting better loot from drops instead of getting, leveled loot, getting level 28 loot, getting level 29 loot, level 30 loot. And then you're kind of maxed out and you're like, I have all this loot, but it's kind of all side grades at this point because you're level 30. Once you complete the main mission and you hit level 30, the world tier will level up and you'll start getting item levels on your loot. And by getting these pieces of items that have really high item levels on them. So for instance, you kind of start around 350 or 250 or something like that. I don't remember which one it is. You'll start as you get better and better loot to get those numbers up higher and higher as the items drop. Sometimes, again, it feels really exciting to get a piece of loot that's like 20 or 30 levels higher than what you got. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is huge. And it increases your item level a massive amount because of the way of I don't know, generality on your gear, you know, because you have a piece that is 20 or 30 higher than what you currently have, the average goes up a significant amount. And then you start getting better and better gear, and it just kind of feeds that loop. And this is when the end game begins. It's pretty much right when you hit max level and right when you finish that main story. For me, I was level 30 and then I finished the main story. For some people, that's not going to be the case. I would suggest just going and doing all the side quests as you get them, and going and getting your shade tech, and you'll be level 30 by the time you finish the main story, and you're going to get this really cool transition. So for those of you who don't know and don't want spoilers on what's about to happen when you hit level 30, then just stop watching this video, go hit level 30, and then come back. I gave you enough time. Once you hit level 30, you finish the main story, a new faction enters the game. It's the Black Tusk. They are like super militarized. They have division tech, and they are really difficult to take on. You know, if you thought that the True Sons were bad with flanking, these guys will outflank you. They will throw all sorts of tech at you. They've got flying drones to throw at you that explode, and there's a lot of really crazy enemy types that come out of the Black Tusk, but they invade the world. All of the places that you took, the strongholds, the missions, they get invaded by the Black Tusk, and it's your job to now go take all that stuff back. You will then go and play through some of the missions that you did at the beginning of the game. You know, like the first mission that you get, where you go get the woman's daughter back, you'll play through that same mission, but it'll be different, you know, because you were there earlier, so the stuff that happened there earlier still remains there. It's just now you're playing through that same level, and things are like different here and there. You know, there's no more explosions happening because the building is like burning down or whatever, because that stuff has already happened. Now there's rubble there that you're fighting your way through. And in the invaded versions of these, you're fighting the Black Tusk instead of the original faction that was there. So it is really cool. As you progress through your end game, you now have to retake these zones that have been taken by the Black Tusk, and you are doing so to progress your world tiers. You know, for example, one of the first strongholds that you clear are for the hyenas, or the True Sons, depending on which one you want to go with. Let's say hyenas. So you want to go take back the hyena stronghold. Then what you end up doing is, when the Black Tusk are there, you have to finish the two missions, like the two main missions that you had in that zone at the beginning of the game. You have to go and fight the Black Tusk there before you can get access to that stronghold. Then you go clear that stronghold. Then it finishes a project for you that upgrades your world tier up and allows you to get better and better loot. But in order to do that stronghold, you have to have a certain item level of gear, so going and doing the side missions and retaking control points and stuff becomes very important. But you're getting cool loot along the way, so it totally makes it worth it. And you can get a pretty good idea of what the end game is like if you play through the game, because you are playing through a lot of the same missions, though they are different. A lot of the same strongholds, though they are different because they have the Black Tusk. But you are also able to go and replay those missions on hard to get good loot out of them from the mission like you originally did. So that first mission that you did with the hyenas, you can go back and do that one on hard and do it all over again and replay it. So stuff is replayable. Stuff is replayable in the fact that now the Black Tusk are taking things over and you have to go and take those back. You can do the strongholds, and as you progress your world tier up, you're getting better and better loot. You're like, okay, that seems like there's a lot to do, because essentially the entire game is reopened for you to go and re-clear, and it is, and it's giving you really cool loot for it, but the game doesn't stop there. It very easily could have stopped there, but it doesn't. It just keeps peeling back the layers. You know, you're now comfortable, you've beaten the game, you understand how all this works, but now there's tons of more layers for you to do. So you can replay these missions, or you could go do bounties. You know, if you go do a certain amount of bounties in a zone, you then unlock one big bounty to go kill. This is a system from the first game, and it worked really well in the first game. You get target intel, you spend that intel to get like big bounties to go kill, and you get loot and rewards from that. It's like, okay, cool, there's another cool way to get loot. But then they add in the specialization system out of nowhere. And it blew my mind, because I had kind of heard about it prior to launch, but I kept my head to the ground. I didn't want to really hear too much about it. So you have these three specializations, that you unlock when you hit level 30. You have Demolitionist, Survivor, and Sharpshooter. Each of them get special weapons. So you go and you choose one. Don't worry, you can switch between them at any given time that you want to, so you're not locked into it. And each of them level up separately. So as you go do missions, you gain specialization points, which you can spend on a branching skill tree for these specializations. What? Like, this didn't have to be there, and it is. So for like the Demolitionist, its special thing is it gets a grenade launcher. The Survivor gets an explosive arrow crossbow, and the Sharpshooter gets a crazy sniper rifle. And each of these specializations kind of focus on certain weapons. You know, the Survivor has the assault rifles and shotguns, but it can also give you a good pistol upgrade in there if you want, you know, use your sidearm. Whereas the Demolitionist has like LMGs and stuff. So there are some really cool things there. I've been playing the Survivor. I've been enjoying the heck out of it. It has a lot of extra healing. It gives you, each of these specialization give you an option for unlocking a new skill subtype. So for the Survivor, it is the little roly-poly drones that you send out, except they go and heal your friends, and it's amazing, and you can get healing buffs for them. But you can also gain huge amounts of damage buffs for your team by inflicting enemies with status effects like burning, and that is a really big deal considering you get incendiary grenades as a Survivor. And the Demolitionist and the Sharpshooter get their own stuff too, and you gain specialization points just from playing, and you get those points to spend on that specialization you're playing. Once you max that specialization out, which I'm maybe a quarter of the way on mine, and I've been playing the end game for over 10 hours, then you can switch to the other ones and level them up too. And it just gives you so much to do. You're like, okay, I can go replay these missions on this game, but now I also have this specialization thing to figure out. And I'm trying to optimize my gear and get gear that is set in, you know, stone for, like, I want to play a Survivor, so I want good assault rifles. So, you know, I'm searching for good assault rifle perks to put on my good assault rifle that I'm going to get when I'm at max item level. And you're finding modifications for those weapons and items that are increasing their item level beyond the item level cap. And it's just a crazy system that has so much going for it. And remember what I said at the beginning, layers, layers, layers. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. Also at max level, you get a new stronghold that you can go clear. Coming up in a future patch, they're going to have 8-person raids that you're going to be able to go and do. And new free content for the entire first year is going to be coming out. You could buy the year 1 pass and get it, I think it was like a week early on some of that content. But for the most part, it's all free. You're going to get new free content updates throughout the year, more and more layers. I didn't even mention the hunters yet. Did you know, if you've been playing this game, I bet you didn't, I bet maybe you hit max level and you didn't know about this. There's literally crazy messages in the game. So while some people were leveling up, focusing on getting to level 30, apparently some people were playing the Da Vinci Code, because there's these, I'm not joking, there are these crazy like murals in the game that are spray painted on walls. And you're like, ooh, that's really pretty. And then you look at it and it's got a message in it, but it's a coded message. And you have to find the decipher, which some people have found the cipher code for this, and have started deciphering these messages. And you know what it leads them to? Secret division hunters. For example, the first one that I have found, I basically, you find the message, it tells you to go to this one like atrium in this area, in like the first area that you unlock within the game. And up in the windows, there's these 4 targets, and you shoot the 4 targets in order through the windows. And when you do that, a division hunter spawns, and he is a badass, and he is literally going to kill you unless you're prepared to take him on. If you kill him, you unlock a customizable mask for your character. It's a cool mask that looks awesome, and each of the hunters drop one. They each drop little collectible items, including really good items for your character. And by completing these, you have like suddenly this huge puzzle in the game to go and find this other collectible content. Oh, and I didn't even mention the fact that, you know, if you're a person who is interested in collectibles, at this point in the game, you can go collect all your echoes and your paintings and your phones. And once you're done with that, if you're a part of a clan, which is new to the Division 2 and is unlocked by doing the theater settlement stuff, then Your clan, as you're playing through the game, is gaining XP and leveling up and unlocking certain content for that clan. And I haven't even touched stuff about the Dark Zone and PvP because they added a completely separate PvP system this time. You could go do the Dark Zone if you liked that from the first game. If you didn't, but you still are interested in PvP, they have a PvP system you can queue up for and you can just go PvP. You don't have to worry about Dark Zone stuff. This game is a game of layers. This game is not afraid of giving you stuff to do. This game is not afraid of giving you cool loot and giving you it abundantly so you can sort through it and have fun trying to figure out what's best for your character and what you want to use. And it's not afraid of giving you cool stuff like specializations and cool new strongholds to go finish. And later on, it's going to be adding even new cool stuff for you to do. And there's the crazy puzzles, you know, like the hunters. You're getting, for instance, the hunters also drop an ivory key. You have a chest in the base of operations in the White House that requires a certain amount of ivory keys. I don't know what comes out of it. I haven't gotten there yet, and I've put like 50 hours into the game because I haven't found all the hunters, and I need to go do that. I need to go collect their masks. They're cool, and I want more loot. In conclusion, this game is awesome. This game is excellent. It has learned from both the past game, you know, it's learned from the first division, and it's learned from the industry as a whole. It has looked at games like Anthem, even though that is a recent release, and has learned from what they were doing in that game. It has learned from Destiny. It has learned from itself. And for it, it is a massively better game, and it is head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. It is absolutely worth your time and money, and it understands how to make a great loot game. And on top of that, it's a fantastic shooter with a lot of stuff to do. It is not perfect, though. It is far from perfect. The story is weak. You're going to find bugs. Now, bugs can be fixed over patches, and they recently had a bug that was causing skills that you use to immediately go on cooldown and get destroyed for like 15 seconds before you could use them again. Well, they've gone through and they fixed that, and they've been on top of trying to bug fix as they go. The game isn't immune to bugs. It's got them. The story is weak. I don't care about what's going on with it. It could be better. Maybe that'll change in the DLC stuff that they add for free. But sometimes also fighting the controls can be really annoying. Sometimes you want to go into cover and you end up vaulting over it and you're like, oh God, what are you doing, character? Like you're going the wrong direction. Or maybe you want to remain in cover and shoot at a guy who's next to you, but it pulls you out of cover. It's just, sometimes you fight the controls. There's things about the game that are not perfect. But on the whole, it is an excellent game that delivers a great leveling experience, a great end game, and just a fun loot game where you're able to get stuff and not have to feel like you're at the mercy of the developer, you know, giving you a slow trickle of percentile upgrade stuff. You know, no, you're getting really cool, exciting upgrades, and it's what pushes the game forward. And they've added so many layers to this game that I'm going to be playing it for months to come and still be finding new stuff. That is the sign of a really great looter shooter. Honestly, I'm 50 hours in, and I can very easily see me over the next week or so putting another 50 in because it is that good. And I'm excited to go and do more endgame stuff. I'm excited to go and play with my friends and do tactical combat with them and try to strategize and figure out which one of us should be running which specialization and what different skills. And there's just so much to this game that I feel like it doesn't end. It just keeps going. And that is fun because I feel like I was recently burned by Anthem, which feels like there's only a couple things to do in the game and the loot that you get doesn't matter. Now, obviously, Anthem will get many updates, and I'll put my own video out on my thoughts on that game once it does, and I have the desire to go back and play it, but man, it's going to be hard with the Division because this game is fantastic, and all of the other games in the genre are going to pale in comparison. I don't see a future where this isn't my game of the year, but that, you know, is with saying that, it is competing against Doom Eternal. I freaking love Doom, so Doom Eternal might just be way better, but we'll see. We'll see how that game ends up turning out. But for the most part, this right now is an excellent game. I don't give scores. This is my first review, but if you wanted to kind of know where I sat on like the grand scheme of scores, it would be a pretty solid 9 out of 10. And I do agree with a lot of other reviewers on that one. Again, it has its issues, which is why it's not a perfect game. But at the same time, it is an excellent game. And because of that, it deserves your attention and it deserves you playing it. And if you've been burned by games like Anthem, this one is here to like comfort you in its big looty arms and just say, come here, baby. I got purples and blues for you and greens and yellows and so much loot. And I'm going to make sure that you have a good time. So let me know what you guys think of The Division. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you not like the game? It's totally okay to not agree with me and think that the game is crap or whatever. But these are just my own opinions on the game and how I feel about it, and looking at it, or trying to look at it objectively in the grand scheme of other games in the genre. And just, hey, you know what? I think it's a good looter shooter. It gives you a good sense of feeling like you're constantly being rewarded. And is that a feeling that you guys also feel, or are you feeling repetitive combat and not feeling the urge to continue going? Let me know in the comments below. But with all of that being said, thank you guys for watching this long, lengthy, in-depth video, and we shall see you guys next time.